when I talk about the art of sales, the art of prospecting, let's not forget that there's a lot of science involved as well. Okay, John Wooden, little March Madness theme quote for you, famous basketball coach back in the day, talks about how luck is the residue of design. All right, and so when you think about how do I design the ideal prospecting system, the ideal business development system, let me define prospecting for you. Okay, prospecting means I have Adam on my lead list. Adam works for a company. He's the key decision maker that I want to connect with, and hopefully have him set a meeting with him. Okay. What do I do? Do I call? Do I email? What do I say? And so to kind of build that process out, there's really 4 things that you need to do and do well. Okay. Then luck will follow. Then the art of prospecting, some of the things I'll get into, things you've learned by just doing, will come into play. Number 1 is segment your leads. Selling in 2021 is all about personalization. And then selling in 2022 and 2023 is gonna be about hyper-personalization. If the customer you're selling to, not marketing, selling, okay, doesn't feel like you know their business, know their challenges, know their pain points, and that you can uniquely kind of position yourself as a qualified kind of partner to that, then a lot of your messaging is just going to miss. You could send out, you could increase the velocity, you could increase the number of messages by 10x, and it won't matter if the leads aren't segmented properly. Okay. 2 is channel distribution. Leveraging that in 2021, it's different than prospecting 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, where we have more channels, i.e. phone, referrals, email, LinkedIn, texting, etc., to get our message across. 3 is similar to sort of marketing campaign. Sales prospecting is all about measuring and optimizing. I would literally be like a billionaire if I could tell you the exact cadence, the exact messaging, et cetera, to kind of put out there. No one has it. No one knows it. You know, one of your local big companies, Sales Loft, has built a whole technology around helping companies better, more efficiently prospect and make that scalable. Okay, make it a little bit more measurable, but they can't tell you what to say, how many touches to reach out to this person. It's all about testing and measuring and optimizing. And the last thing is, i.e. Sales Loft, you can adopt some sales kind of technology infrastructure. When I first started in sales, 2006, I equated to like Rocky IV. I was Rocky. The sales reps today are Ivan Dragoff. They have all this technology. I was like, Brian, here's your phone. You know, here's leads, go do your thing. Okay. So leverage the technology infrastructure outside of just the CRM when you think about building the ideal prospecting strategy. Okay. Any questions on these 4 things? I'm going to dive into a brief detail about each of these as well, but any questions on these 4 as a frame up? So you've started a business, you're making money, you have customers, you want to make more money, you want to have more customers. You know, maybe some of you did a business model canvas or a business plan or a lean canvas of some sort. But really, you know, this is this is the beginning stages of saying, who do we want to focus on, right? Customer segments is truly one of the areas and variables of a business model canvas, okay? In sales, we call that ideal customer profile. Have you heard that terminology before? Raise your hand, ideal customer profile. Yeah, okay, cool. So basically saying, out of all of these potential customers, who do we feel is going to be ideally suited to benefit from our product or service? Okay. So this is an example of a company that offers law firms and particularly public defenders a better way to transcribe video evidence. Big problem. Okay. They serve 2 customers, public defenders and then also civil defenders. Okay. So got to segment your leads. Ideal customer profile can help with that. Second thing is channel distribution. Mix it up. Prospecting today isn't about saying, you know, hey, it's not a transactional event, number 1, okay? Number 2 is that everything should build off of each other. So you don't want to say, what am I going to do today? Today is part of a larger plan. And so when you build out and say, I want to land a meeting with Adam, you want to work 20 days back, 40 days back, 60 days back, and say, what is this going to look like over the next 60 days, the next 30 days, in order for Adam to say, yes, let's meet? Well, I got to use different channels. I'm going to reach out over emails, calls, etc. I'm going to space my messaging out, okay? And I'm going to measure and figure out, is email the right one? Is calls the right one? Is LinkedIn's the right one? And kind of elevate the distribution from there, okay? That's channel distribution. Third thing is measuring and optimizing. How many touches do you think it will take to land a meeting? So have your sales funnel in place. Sales funnels are built to be improved. They're built to change. How many of you set the financial model in 2020 in terms of, where you plan to be? 2020 is a bad year, probably, but let's look at 2019, right? How many funnels in 2019 from January to December played out as they intended to? They never do. They always change. But you got to measure. Absolutely have to measure here. A couple other things to measure. Lead quality. So you ask, like, okay, Brian, how can I focus on going after better quality leads? Okay. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but one thing is just to not necessarily overthink it, which is where your closed one, first off, where are your opportunities coming from? Anyone that's agreeing to meeting with you or advancing past that meeting set stage, then obviously where's the source of your revenue coming from? Compounding that. How are you distributing your channel right now? So you're like, gosh, I can't get a meeting with Adam. I've reached out 20 times. Well, have 18 of them been emails? Have 18 of them been phone calls? Have 18 of them been LinkedIn message? How much are you diversifying from a channel distribution perspective? And the last thing is from a tech stack aspect. Here's some tools in here, whether you know them or not, that you can be building your business development efforts around. Great tools. Highly recommend them if and when you're ready for those. Usually best time when you hire your first or second sales rep who can actually take advantage and make the most out of these as opposed to founder selling, okay? So I'll stop there and go to the chat and see what kind of questions you have to kind of frames up with what I kind of talked about so far. But in general, like, based off of those 4 pieces of developing a biz dev strategy, any questions on those or any things I can kind of dive into deeper? That was just a frame up in terms of just getting the basics right.
Brian, this is Sarah. I did have a question for you. So I've been evaluating some of the kind of LinkedIn lead generation services that help you kind of communicate on a regular cadence, reach out, do prospecting on LinkedIn, et cetera. And Sales Off was one of those that I was looking at. So how do you recommend to best leverage those? And you mentioned just now, like to have that if you have a salesperson. I'm currently the founder doing work plus sales. So how do you kind of navigate through that and the best, what's your recommendation for that, leveraging these tools?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think in particular, first off, like really be as prescriptive as possible as it relates to what problem is this tool solving for you as a founder who's trying to sell. So an example of that would be, if you said, Brian, like I have good messaging, I just need to get it out to more people. Like I am struggling to get the activity and like hit the top of the funnel numbers just to give myself a fighting chance of having a good pipeline. Then I would say, you know what, I think it would make sense now to adopt a tool like a Sales Loft where, yes, after 5 hours of setup, you would solve the activity problem overnight. Okay. But if you said, I'm reaching out a ton, 100 people a day, 100 people a day, 100 people today, and no one's getting back to me, then I would say, okay, adopt a LinkedIn Sales Navigator because your targeting is all screwed up. And you need to work smarter, not harder. So tools are meant to solve a business problem for us within the sales funnel, right? Prospecting to meeting is the hardest part of the sales funnel. So be really prescriptive about kind of what the tool is meant to do. And then sincerely leverage the heck out of that person who's selling you to make sure that like they're giving you assurance it's going to do that for you, and that they can have their onboarding and implementation person almost pre-build it for you as a founder to make it as easy as possible to implement. I think that's the beauty of us, like, and whether you whether you have a software that you sell, whether you're buying software, there's other options out there. And so the buyer has a lot of leverage over not only price, but also service, because what their investors are keeping an eye on is churn. Not just closing, Sarah, it's about how can we keep Sarah, and leverage the heck out of that fact to make it as easy as possible for you to implement.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Other questions on what I just went through from the framework perspective? So Mike has a good question. I'm just going to go through a few questions here, then we'll move on to some of the other lessons. So appreciate you chatting these out. Let me just kind of work bottom up here, Mike. So Mike's kind of asking basically like, what else from a cadence perspective due to COVID are you seeing working for companies? Okay, let's say phone, for example, based off your target market might be off the table. People aren't in their offices, they're not answering their cell phones. It's just more difficult to reach out over phone right now, okay? So what other techniques amidst the noise of others are you kind of seeing? Number one is referral and network. So Mike, I don't know how much effort has been put into that thus far. It sounds like a lot of effort has been put into LinkedIn, more calling, more emailing, et cetera. Not happy with the results. But how, first off, I would come up with a top 100 list, okay? If you haven't done this as a founder, come up with your top 100 list. Here's the top 100 ideal customers we want to land in 2021. Second step, facilitate with your network. Hey, Mike, here's who we're going after: your advisors, your board, your employees. Third is identify the contacts who can get you in the door. So when you have the cadence, so first off, emails and calls and LinkedIn's, that cadence that I showed can't stop. That's the tough part about this. It can't stop. You can't turn off the business development engine. Even if it's not working as well, you just have to focus on tweaking it and improving it, okay? So keep the calls and emails up. What I do when I'm not getting a high response rate is I'll space out my cadence. So take it from 3 days spacing to 7 day spacing. I will add another contact. I will reaffirm I have the right contact information. Assuming you've done all those things, then I'd say going back to targeting, smaller list, i.e. top 50, top 100, and leveraging referrals and network. Mike, feel free to shout out questions or feedback based on what I just shared there.
Yep, no, I think that's helpful. It's just about, I was the one that dropped in earlier, keeping it fresh, right? And so, I work in the SaaS space after 10 years, and a lot of it is absolutely referral based, specifically those within the first, call it 3 to 5 days after a close. This is the best chance that you have for those referrals. So just that a bit. But, of course, everybody's crowding inboxes these days. And by inbox, I don't mean the literal, I mean the figurative. Of course, that's inboxes as we know them, but also voicemails and LinkedIn boxes and everything else, right? So
it's crazy. Yep.
Even with those references, thinking way outside the box is where that question came from.
Yeah, and I think so. It's a great question. It's a challenge that is facing a lot of people. And I'll go to Joshua's question because it's kind of in line with that from how I would solve that is, first off, how do you get your prospects to respond to your cold emails? So that's part of the same sort of question here is, so let's go back to the channel distribution, lead segmentation. And then now one thing we're hitting on here is messaging. You can reach out 40 times to a person, but if the messaging's off, or if the lead segmentation or the alignment's off, it typically won't get a response, okay? I love this quote. I love it as a CEO trying to communicate with my team. I love it as a person who's trying to sell, right? So here are 4 questions that I have people answer to kind of audit their outbound messaging. All right. So if you were kind of to say, hey, how can I increase my reach people responding to my cold emails? Then I would make sure that the messaging you're hitting on answers this, number 1. Number 2 is I was make sure that those messages are spaced out and we're not fitting 4 of these problems that we solve in one email. Prospecting is educating. It's educating. Every single time I reach out to Adam, every single time I reach out to Mike or Sarah, it's what is else something new I can inform them of as it relates to how my company might help solve some of their challenges or problems or help them meet their aspirations. And I asked those 2 questions. What challenges do they have that I could help solve, or what aspirations do they have that I can help them get to faster? And my messaging starts to flow from there. And if I have 5 great answers, I don't shove them in one email. Why? Because I know it's going to take a lot of times and a lot of attempts for me to actually get that person to get back to me. And so I just basically kind of drip it out. It's a little bit of discipline, right? Having the discipline to say, I'm going to not throw this all at you right now, even though I'm so excited, especially as founders selling. Like, we eat our own dog food. We freaking love what we do. We are passionate about what we offer, but people don't necessarily buy off of a 4-paragraph email either, right? They will buy after, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's interesting. All right, now's the time to meet with Sarah. So there's a discipline to saying, do you have the right messaging, and are you spacing it out based off of some of the kind of basic rules of thumb that I'm getting at? But these questions are key. Don't tell me what your company does. I don't care. Don't tell me about this cool feature that you have. I don't care. Tell me why you can help me. Tell me why you are best positioned to help me, i.e. why you're different. Provide proof and credibility and evidence that says, I'm not going to be a guinea pig on this new product or service. And incorporate some level of urgency that says, Brian, if you wait 6 months, that might be bad. So I think we should talk in the next 6 days or 6 hours. So this is an exercise. If you've rolled out like OKRs or goals or values, like getting your outbound messaging right is hard to do. It takes time. It takes effort. It's going to take weeks, maybe months. But if you get kind of these answers right now, it'll save you a ton of time. And then you think about hiring as a founder and kind of the exec team, kind of whoever's represented this call. Once you get this messaging right, it makes the hiring and onboarding of that person a heck of a lot easier, as opposed to saying, help us figure out what to say. Questions, comments on that?
Hey, Brian, I have a quick question based on that.
Yeah, Max.
So you mentioned, which I found it kind of, my ears perked up when you said this, that customers don't want to be the guinea pig. And I know, I'm in this position, and I would imagine a lot of other ATDC members are. We're kind of early startups, right?
Yep.
So we are actually looking for people who are okay with being guinea pigs in exchange for, doing something new that maybe other companies won't have access to. So I'm wondering how you think about that message. Of course, you don't want to, be deceitful and say, oh, we're really established and mature. But on the other hand, you don't want to come across as sloppy. So wondering your thoughts on that guinea pig comment.
Well, a few things here. It's a great question, and it comes up a lot, right? And myself face the exact same scenario. So whether you are trying to land your first customer or your 1,000th customer, always remember that one of the rules of selling is people will buy you in addition to what you have to offer. It is true. People buy you, Max, in addition to the company you represent. But right now, they're going to be buying more 80% you and 20% the company. So I think what's key from a positioning perspective is focusing on kind of the product or service efficacy why this is product and service and how you built it, how you designed it, what you offer is so good because of the team behind it, and make that the sort of proof point that people need to say, this is great. It's gonna be better than what I can do. Because ultimately, credibility of that social proof is one of the, if you haven't read it, read Influence by Robert Cialdini. It's a phenomenal book on persuasion, influencing behavior. One of those 6 is social proof. Ultimately, what I'm getting at is once they see a logo or a name, oh, okay, this increases the chance I'll buy from you. But there's different ways to build credibility. And credibility isn't the only reason they're going to want to buy from you. But you can institute credibility right now, and from a messaging perspective, as well as kind of a sales meeting to close perspective. And that credibility has to come from you and why you design this product or service different and better to solve the problem that's been existing for probably a long time. And if you can iron that out, you'll have people buy on. Okay. So for my story was at Victory Lap, I had interviewed thousands of people, thousands of hours of training and development, managed 150 person sales teams. And oh, by the way, that was the person who was going to be interviewing the talent. That was the person who's going to be training this talent. Okay. Compared to what? Job boards, compared to a third-party staffing firm. Yes, we were brand new. I had zero evidence this thing was going to work, but it was better and different than the status quo or the incumbent, where it made people think from a risk-free perspective. Here's how I start on. Now, I also lowered my price point, which didn't hurt either, right? I came in at a very low entry point to the market, hence pilot programs that you can offer. Okay. So I think long answer, Max, but what I'm getting to takeaways there are sell yourself and the team, sell the product and service efficacy, and 3, make sure you pinpoint on, while you can't prove it, you're sincerely believing it's better and different than what exists today. And if you do those 3 things well, customers will follow.
Thank you.
Yeah. Claire asked a question around, can you segment by like the early adopter persona? It's a really good question, right? The law of diffusion curve, which is there are that early adopters that exist in the marketplace and the laggers and so forth. I don't have an answer on how you can pinpoint that person as like I want to buy this lead list, or I'm going to go on LinkedIn and find this person, so to speak. I think you could probably insinuate that to a certain degree. But the question you're raising, Clara, is during your quote unquote needs assessment, so when you have a sales meeting, so you've got the prospecting piece down, you landed the meeting, awesome. One of the questions I want to vet for is their appetite for risk as an organization, their appetite for risk as a persona, and don't necessarily say use risk as the question base around it, but what is their appetite for adopting innovative solutions to long-standing problems? What is their criteria for adopting something that doesn't have as much time in the market, but has the potential to be better than the existing players in the space? Those are a couple of questions that I'd be wanting to get out in my meetings to better understand if the person I'm selling to is going to be my champion or my blocker. Maybe get one more question here. Are we doing time? Any other questions while I'm just going through? Just want to see if there's anything else I can pull out before I go into my last few slides here. So Jonathan, technical founder, selling software into enterprise. My company is building a supply chain tool, et cetera. Large, mid-sized, and small enterprise customers, and getting your foot in the door is a big challenge. So, that's why this is kind of an interesting topic, the art of prospecting, because art of prospecting for SMB is very different than art of prospecting for enterprise. And so I think, back to the question that Sarah asked earlier, Jonathan, like having a technology infrastructure to be able to manage the length of a prospecting cycle, I think is going to be key for you, number one. You want to adopt what would be called more of an account-based sales strategy as opposed to maybe more of a traditional sales strategy. So account-based sales strategy means you're going to want to focus on 50 to 75 of those smaller enterprise customers. Have a tool like a Sales Loft where you could be nurturing those leads over an extended period of time, because the time to set a meeting with those customers could be anywhere between maybe 3 and 6 months. You know, just painting a picture. I don't know exactly your market specifically, but that's kind of traditional enterprise, right? So one, you can't manage that and do that effectively. So that's where technology then could be a good aid to you. Number two, though, is account-based sales strategy is like grab 7 contacts from that and start bottom up. Don't start top down. So if the person who signs off as the CFO is the head of supply chain, whatever that may be, then start bottom up, working your way into the organization from a meeting perspective. You as the founder might be able to kind of leverage mid-level to more senior level, but don't go senior level this early on as a company and as a brand, because the downside of going senior level, if the C-suite tells you no at the prospecting level, it's very difficult to come back in through a different door. Versus if someone lower in the food chain, so to speak, tells you no, you can still find yourself way in through higher levels up the food chain. Feel free to follow up with a question on that, or if I can explain further on it.
No,
Brian,
that's great. Thank you.
Yes, Sarah.
So just building on what you were just mentioning, starting kind of like at the lower point instead of the higher point. So I've been told, though, to start also with people who have the ability to make decisions, right? Who have ability to actually purchase. So how do you balance those two?
Well, it's a great question. Again, think about what we're talking about right now. We're talking about prospecting, okay? So there's typically 3 sales to make to actually land a deal, to get a contract back, okay? Sale 1 is get the meeting. First sale you got to make. Mm-hmm. Get the meeting. Get in the door. Is it necessary? Let me ask you this. Is it necessary to land a deal, to close a deal does that person who makes the decision have to be on that first meeting? The answer is no. You can have the meeting with the director of marketing, even though the CMO is the one who needs to sign off on it.
Right.
So what I'm talking about here is expediting the velocity of which you can close your first sale, which is a meeting. And you expedite the velocity of which you can do that by having more contacts to break into. Frankly, as an earlier kind of stage company and team, sometimes we are beggars can't be choosers, right? Like we want that first batch of customers. We want that first wave of great customers. And so I will talk with, the SDR first to break into the SDR manager, who then will introduce me to the VP of sales, who will then introduce me to the chief revenue officer. And now I got the deal. Mm-hmm. But because I can't, I don't carry the brand equity that a Salesforce does. So that's a big clarification point is, remember, you're making a couple sales, but the second sale is meeting to next stage. So great, Sarah. Based off what we talked about today, I see a lot of alignment as it relates to how you are trying to really increase brand exposure this year. And especially with the way things have been playing out so far, the need for additional solutions and help in that area seems to be very clear. As a result of this meeting, I would love to get your chief marketing officer involved for the 3 of us to dive into this in further detail. Sale 2, sale 3, CMO, other persons involved, close the deal. So recognize that sales is typically several micro sales depending on your sales and buyer's process, and that the techniques and strategies that you hear about to close the deal and drive revenue sometimes or sometimes don't apply at other quote unquote sales in the funnel.
Awesome, thanks.
2 lessons before we open up for questions as it relates to prospecting that I took from my Groupon days. Again, fastest company to achieve $1 billion in revenue. It was a crazy, crazy time. And we had an inside sales force of 600-700 sales reps. We had an outside sales force of another 200-300 reps. It was crazy. At one point, we had 100,000 small businesses on the website that were actively marketing a deal, okay? So we didn't have structure, we didn't have process. They just had a bunch of money and a bunch of revenue to hire a bunch of salespeople to go make a bunch of phone calls. That's how we got there. Okay, so what was happening though was every day as a sales team and a sales force, we were just learning as we were flying, right? And I'm just sharing these lessons with you to never underestimate two things. Number one, what sort of hustle and scrappiness plays as relates to prospecting and getting meetings and getting over that first hump and wave of revenue. Number two is don't underestimate logic and reasoning to your approach. For example, once if I was selling in the Chicago market and one of my teammates in Chicago closed a pizza restaurant, the first thing we all tried to do was Google Map pizza, the location of that restaurant they just closed, and just start calling. It didn't matter that we only had one restaurant in the area. Back to the question around, I don't have a lot of evidence. We didn't have to say we have 1,000 restaurants pizza restaurants working with us. It was, you know what? Hey, Max, looks Victoria DOC just signed up. And the reason why they signed on with Groupon is because they're tired of paying out of pocket and not knowing what, if anything, they're going to get in return for that. The way we structure our marketing campaigns is kind of make it on a win-win basis. You get customers, we'll split the revenue. If not, you're not paying us anything. And oh, by the way, we'll make sure we structure each campaign to ensure it's ROI positive for you. Not sure if you have a similar need as Strategic DOC. Wanted to see if you had a quick minute, maybe we could explore this a little bit further. And that became a rinse and repeat across 230 markets. One of the reasons how we got to $1 billion in revenue. So sometimes you have this strategy, you have this grand plan, but then an event happens, a customer event happens. And it's important to really pay attention to that and say, hey, is this repeatable? This company all of a sudden likes what we do. This company likes that feature, just bought us, just agreed to pay us double than what we typically would have charged for these reasons. How can I now go out and find 100 more of those people? So that lead segmentation piece is a really evolving piece to prospecting. Second lesson was, revenue growth and kind of how you pitched your product or how you maybe modified the pitch of your product or sometimes even modified the product itself based off what your sales team was hearing on the floor, okay? So a laser hair removal deal at Groupon was generating $5 million a year for us. Then one rep decided to structure it a little bit differently and do it by area. So small, medium, large. And as a result of providing the consumer optionality, our purchasing and revenue rate went up 20x. A deal used to generate $12,000 for the business for Groupon, and now is generating over $100,000. How? Because a sales rep talked to a customer, and together they figured out a solution that worked for them and for us, and that became now a repeatable thing for the whole business to sell. Just logical, right? Customer says, I like this, do it, it increases revenue, rinse and repeat. Close a business in a certain area, i.e. social proof because of geographical means or type of business, and just mention that name, all of a sudden, boom, you have 100 more of those. So there's a lot of strategy, there's a lot of principles and fundamentals to play a part in this, but at the end of the day, the best sales advisor you'll have isn't on the board, it's not on your team, it is the person you're talking to every single day. It's the customer. It's the customer. I'm the second best sales coach and advisor you'll ever have in your life, but they're the number one, all right? So, have a few minutes left here. I can go a few minutes over if you all can. What questions, challenges did I not get to, or things that you want to call out? We could address here the last 5-10 minutes or so. Go ahead and speak out. Don't worry about chat. Let's go through these chat as well. See if there's anything else I can pull through.
I have one.
Yes.
Do you normally see structures where the salesperson also then has a role in account management going forward, and how important or what's some best practices about making that transition from the person who sold in the product or service to the person who eventually maintained that account on a daily basis?
It still is a pretty common structure, Nancy, to have a person who sells the deal, service the deal. I particularly like it for startups, for newer hires, because it is so important to make sure that the salesperson isn't just focusing on that as their endpoint, but they're focusing on closing the right deals, the right customers. And they can, and most importantly though, once that customer is happy, think about how much that helps their pitch and their positioning for future customers they're talking to. You know, one of the best ways to get your sales team pumped up and get your sales team pitching better and selling more effectively is having talked to a happy customer. Why did you buy again, Nancy? What problem did this solve? Where did we meet your expectations or exceed your expectations? What did we end up doing for you that you weren't expecting we could do for you? Really interesting. No. Goes in my pitch deck, goes in my pitch deck, goes in my pitch deck. So the ability to kind of create that relationship sooner as you're building your team, I think is really important. And then simply put, I think when your customer now is at risk of getting less quality service that has a business impact on you, maybe lower churn, eliminates opportunity for upsell, or hurts their business, is kind of when you start to say, we're losing something here. I mean, segmentation for sales, SDR, BDR, then to AE to customer success, was basically born out of each function has a lot to do and a lot on their plate, and something is being not addressed as effectively because of that. So what did companies do? They segmented those roles into 3 different ones. So until you have too much to do, I think the way you would approach it is have that person sell and service and leverage the benefits of doing so.
Great, thank you so much.
Hopefully this was helpful, you all. Just in terms of maybe giving you something new to think about, reinforce some things, or in particular, just get a different perspective on some of the challenges that are really common across the board as it relates to prospecting. There's no magic bullet to someone say, hey, here's how I can get this person to get back to me. There's a lot of discipline involved, but there's also a lot of optimization that comes with experience and learning. And I've tried to share a few of those today. In addition to, don't discount what you're learning what you're learning from a day-to-day perspective as well.
Brian, I have another question. So, so my business is focused on building connection between brands and Hispanic audiences. And so my buyer would typically be someone on the marketing team or the multicultural marketing team, or perhaps diversity and inclusion. So ideally mid-market to Fortune 500 company. And you're talking about kind of the customer discovery. I mean, I used to be the customer sitting on the multicultural marketing team at Coke. But how do you suggest getting the customer insights that you're mentioning as you're kind of new going into the market and tapping into those people anyway to become your customers?
Have you done to make sure I'm understanding your question properly, I'll give you my answer to that, which would just be, have you just requested the coffee chats? In this case, virtual coffee chat. Hey, have some things we're working on over here. Want to pick your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Think you could be a good person to talk through this with. Have you leveraged that at all?
You know what? Like, I literally just thought that before you said that. I was like, oh, you could reach out and be like, okay, let's just I would love your perspective.
Yeah.
So no, I haven't, but that's a good idea.
There's, it's funny. I think about I
have a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah. I think there's like the 50 coffee principle, which is like have 50 coffees and get, when you start your business, I think about that as I'm constantly doing that. I'm constantly pulsing people for what are you hearing? What are you seeing 4 years later? So I think to be able to it's amazing how much people want to help, so I think I would actually encourage you to do that for people who are an extension of your network, or who may to use it as a way to build your network.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
So see people in the space and just reach out to the random people and say, listen, I'm looking for some insight. Founder, solving this problem. Would love your perspective and experience with this, and happy to help in any way I can for you to return the favor. I bet you're going to get a lot of hits on that. I do. Second thing is, there's a joke that one of a successful founder and CEO once told me, which was when you're thinking about biz dev yourself, especially in the early days, is I think one of the comments I made was coming up with a top 100 list. think about who loves you and who owes you as your like first biz dev list. I thought that was great, because think about it. So and this is something I tell our students in our program, like social capital is the missing link to a lot of problems for a lot of people. We do not leverage our networks enough. We don't monetize our networks enough. And there is a huge, and I teach this more to younger professionals kind of building up their career, but when I left Groupon, I had the most valuable thing that I had was my name, because I did well there and I could tap into really smart, talented people, way smarter than talented than me in a lot of areas for help. And that social capital is something that I think if you can build that up and draw from, and then also give it back to others, I think it's a game changer for founders, and because knowing now, like just 4 years in, I've built up such a network because of people that I did not have 4 years ago. And it's in people's blood to want to help you, especially if they can relate to the problem you're trying to solve.
Love it. Thank you.
Yep. Cool. Any other questions before we wrap up here? Would love for you to connect with me, either LinkedIn, email. If there's other questions that may pop up, or just to stay connected in general, if I could be of help in the future, whether it be in connections, just hop on a call and talk about why we started a company and Robbie's crazy, that conversation. So whatever it may be, would love to stay connected one way or another. So